Hello and good day. For today, I'm going to discuss common stock and preferred stock. As a brief introduction, common stock and preferred stock are two classes of stock issued by a corporation. So without further ado, let's start. Before anything else, let me discuss first the forms of business organization. There are three forms of business organization, and they are first, sole proprietorship, second, partnership, and third, corporation. Sole proprietorship is otherwise known as single proprietorship. Sole proprietorship or single proprietorship is a business organization owned by only one person. Sole proprietorship or single proprietorship is the simplest form of business organization. This is the simplest form of business organization since this is the easiest to form. And aside from the fact that this is the easiest to form, sole proprietorship or single proprietorship requires less capital. Kahit konti lang yung capital mo, you can put up a sole proprietorship. Next, partnership. The legal definition of partnership can be found in the Civil Code of the Philippines. Paano ba dinefine ng Civil Code of the Philippines ang partnership? By the contract of partnership, two or more persons bind themselves to contribute money, property, or industry to a common fund with the intention of dividing the profits among themselves. That is the definition of partnership in the Civil Code of the Philippines. As you can see in the definition provided by the Civil Code of the Philippines, a partnership is a contract. Kapag sinabing contract, there is a meeting of minds. There is an agreement between the parties involved. Therefore, since partnership is a contract, partnership is formed by the agreement of the partners. Yung mga partners, pwede silang mag-contribute ng tatlo. Una, money. Pangalawa, property. At pangatlo, industry. Of course, kapag money, ang ibig sabihin niyan, cash. Kapag property, non-cash. That means pwede silang mag-contribute ng lupa or land, property, building, machinery, equipment, and others. Ang ibig sabihin ng industry ay expertise or skills. Hindi lang money or property ang pwede nilang i-contribute, pwede rin silang mag-contribute ng expertise or skills. Based on the definition provided by the Civil Code of the Philippines, the partners contribute money, property, or industry because they have a purpose or intention. And what is that purpose or intention? The purpose or intention is to divide profits among themselves. Kung may profit ang partnership, they will share in the profits. And of course, take note, if the partnership incurs losses, they will also share in the losses. Next, corporation. Corporation is a business organization owned by shareholders or owners. Let's expound the concept of a corporation. A corporation is an artificial being created by operation of law. It says here that a corporation is an artificial being. It is an artificial being because in reality, a corporation is not a person. But take note, even though it is not a person in reality, the corporation is treated by the law as if it is a person. So in reality, hindi talaga person ang corporation. Pero sa mata ng batas, it is treated as if it is a person. The law treats it as if it is a person. Next, a corporation is created by operation of law. This means that a corporation cannot come into existence by mere agreement of parties. Ang ibig sabihin nito, hindi na-form ang corporation dahil sa agreement ng parties. Unlike sa partnership na kung saan ang partnership ay contract. Meaning to say, the partnership is formed by the agreement of the parties. Pero sa corporation, hindi siya na-form. Hindi siya nag-e-exist because of the agreement of the parties. Because a corporation requires the authority and grant from the state. Meaning to say, there must be a law that will create or govern the corporation. In the Philippines, the general law which governs the creation of private corporations is the Corporation Code of the Philippines. Private corporations owned or controlled by the government or any subdivision or instrumentality thereof are created by special laws. A corporation is a legal or juridical person with a personality separate and apart from its individual members or shareholders who as natural persons are merged in one corporate body. In other words, the personality of the corporation is different from the personality of those who compose the corporation. Of course, the shareholders or members compose the corporation. And these members or shareholders are natural persons, meaning to say they are real persons. It says here that the personality of the corporation is separate from the personality of the members or shareholders. Meaning to say, the shareholders or members compose the corporation, but they are not the corporation. Let us now proceed to the components of corporation. There are 4 components of corporation, and they are: first, corporators; second, incorporators; third, shareholders or stockholders; and fourth, members. Corporators are those who compose the corporation, whether shareholders or members or both. Kung idadigest natin to, lahat ng shareholders ay corporators at lahat ng members ay corporators. Pero hindi lahat ng corporators ay shareholders at hindi lahat ng corporators ay members. Next, incorporators. Incorporators are those corporators mentioned in the Articles of Incorporation as originally forming and composing the corporation. Ano ba yung Articles of Incorporation? Yung Articles of Incorporation ay yung document na fina-file ng incorporators sa Securities and Exchange Commission or SEC para makapag-form ng corporation. After filing the Articles of Incorporation, mag-i-issue si Securities and Exchange Commission ng Certificate of Incorporation. And that Certificate of Incorporation is the final determination of the corporation's right to do business. Meaning to say, from the moment the Securities and Exchange Commission issues to the incorporators a certificate of incorporation, the corporation commences or starts to have juridical personality and legal existence. It says here in the definition that incorporators are those corporators mentioned in the Articles of Incorporation. Meaning to say, kung idadigest natin yan, lahat ng incorporators ay corporators, pero hindi lahat ng corporators ay incorporators. Next, shareholders or stockholders. Shareholders or stockholders are owners of shares in a stock corporation. Ang corporation kasi pwede yang stock corporation or non-stock corporation. Kapag stock corporation, ito yung corporation na nag-i-issue ng shares. Yung non-stock corporation naman, ito yung corporation na hindi nag-i-issue ng shares. Next, members. Members are corporators of a non-stock corporation. So what is the similarity between shareholders or stockholders and members? They are both corporators. Recall that corporators are either shareholders or members, or corporators are both shareholders and members. Ano naman ang kanilang difference? Ang shareholders or stockholders, ito yung corporators sa stock corporation. Pero yung members, sila yung corporators sa non-stock corporation. In-emphasize ko yung corporation because the corporation is the only business organization that issues shares or stocks, and we are going to study the classes of shares or stocks. There are two classes of shares or stocks, and they are first, common stock, and second, preferred stock. Common stock is actually a Philippine term. The international term for common stock is ordinary share. So do not be confused because common stock and ordinary share are the same. On the other hand, preferred stock is also a Philippine term. And the international term for preferred stock is preference share. So, wag din kayong mako-confuse sa preferred stock at preference share dahil magkapareho lang sila. I will explain the two classes of shares or stocks one by one. Let's start with the first class of shares or stocks, and that is the common stock or ordinary share. If there is only one class of share, it necessarily is ordinary share. Ang ibig sabihin nito ay kung isang klase lang ng share ang meron sa corporation, hindi ito pwedeng preference share. Meaning to say, the issuance of preference shares without ordinary shares is prohibited. Those who own ordinary shares are called ordinary shareholders. Ordinary shareholders generally control the management of the corporation. Bakit tinawag itong ordinary share? Tinawag itong ordinary share dahil ang ordinary shareholders ay may parehong rights and privileges. They have the same rights and privileges. The ordinary shareholders enjoy no preference over one another. Generally, the ordinary share gives the owner the right to vote, to share in the income, and in the event of liquidation, to share in all assets after satisfying creditors' claims and preference shareholders' claims. First, the ordinary shareholders have the right to vote. In other words, holders of ordinary shares have voting rights. This is actually one of the advantages of owning ordinary shares, because ordinary shareholders have the right to vote. Usually, it is one vote per share. Take note na yung tinutukoy na right to vote dito ay yung right to vote in the shareholders' meetings. Ang preference shareholders kasi, they don't have the right to vote. Pero yung mga ordinary shareholders, they have the right to vote. Second, the ordinary shareholders have the right to share in the income of the corporation. In other words, they have the right to share in the corporate profits. The right to share in the corporate profits is also known as the right to receive dividends. Mamaya, i-explain ko yung dividends. Third, in the event of liquidation, the ordinary shareholders have the right to share in all assets after satisfying creditors' claims and preference shareholders' claims. Kapag sinabing liquidation, this is the termination of business operations. The most common reason why corporations liquidate is insolvency. Kapag insolvent yung corporation, ang ibig sabihin nito, mas malaki yung total liabilities ng corporation kaysa sa kanyang total assets. In case merong liquidation, may right ang ordinary shareholders to share in the assets. But take note, dapat munang mabayaran yung utang ng corporation sa creditors at mabayaran yung preference shareholders bago makapag-claim ang ordinary shareholders. The ordinary shareholders have no fixed or specific return on investment. Their financial reward is dependent on the operations of the entity. So as you can see, Paiba-iba yung return on investment ng ordinary shareholders kasi depende kung profitable ang corporation. Malaki ang profit ng corporation o nagkaroon ng losses ang corporation. If the entity is exceptionally profitable, the holdings of ordinary shareholders will become more valuable. Conversely, if an entity suffers losses, the value of the ordinary shareholders' equity will be reduced as fewer assets are available to satisfy residual claims. Meaning to say, the ordinary shareholders tend to profit most if the corporation is successful. So, kung sobrang laki ng income or profit ng corporation, yan ay advantage ng ordinary shareholders. Kasi kung sobrang laki ng income or profit ng corporation, then malaki din ang kanilang marireceive. Punta naman tayo sa preferred stock or preference share. Preference share is so called because of the preferences granted to the preference shareholders. Meaning to say, the name is derived from the preference given to the holders of preference shares over the holders of ordinary shares. At ano-ano yung mga preferences na yon? The preferences usually pertain to the preference shareholders' claims on dividends and net assets in the event of liquidation. So first, preference shareholders are entitled to receive dividends before any dividends are paid to the ordinary shareholders. So, unang babayaran ng corporation ang preference shareholders. After mabayaran yung preference shareholders, babayaran ng corporation ang ordinary shareholders. Ano ba yung dividends? Dividends are distributions of earnings or capital to the shareholders in proportion to their shareholdings. In other words, kapag sinabing dividends, ito yung share ng shareholders sa corporate profits. Ang dividends, pwedeng manggaling yan sa earnings ng corporation, and aside from the earnings of the corporation, pwedeng manggaling din yung dividends from the capital of the corporation. Second, preference shareholders are the first to claim on net assets in the event of liquidation. Ang ibig sabihin ng net assets ay capital. Assets minus liabilities ay equal sa net assets or capital. However, though they enjoy preference over the ordinary shareholders, the preference shareholders have only a limited or fixed return on investment. So, mas lamang ang ordinary shareholders kung ang laki ng profit ng corporation kasi malaki din ang marireceive ng ordinary shareholders. Ang preference shareholders, since fixed ang return on investment, fixed pa rin ang kanilang kita kahit sobrang laki ng profit ng corporation. For example, a holder of 100 pesos par value, 12% preference share is entitled to an annual dividend if declared of 12% of 100 pesos or 12 pesos. So regardless of the profit of the corporation, fixed na 12 pesos yung makukuha ng preference shareholder. Whether malaki or maliit yung profit ng corporation, fixed na 12 pesos yung marireceive ng preference shareholder.